him, I said, I thought this is a free country, you know. I don't live in Nazi Germany. This is America. You can't come in here and just take my child.
I think they are a danger to our people. They're an insult to our profession, and they've been established unequivocally. But it's simply a scam to generate enormous money.
They didn't treat them like human beings. They treated them worse than dogs. Prisoners had more rights than what we had there.
If you have adequate insurance coverage, regardless of your mental health needs, I assure you that at least the way it's operated in Texas, the recommendation will be made to admit you into a private psychiatric facility.
They told me things, you know, to get me in. And once I got in, they played along for a few days. And then it was like a nightmare.
Literally hundreds of millions of dollars are hanging here in the balance, and the manner in which those profits are currently being made is effectively by selling human beings at their most vulnerable point and at precisely the time when those individuals need help the most, need assistance the most. We have medical professionals and business interests coming in and attempting to abuse the trust that ought to be involved in that relationship solely and exclusively for a profit and greed motive.
There is a scandal in America. Private psychiatric hospitals are locking up perfectly sane adults and children against their will purely for profit. Healthcare in America is dominated by the free market. With some 10 million Americans now being treated for drug, alcohol, and mental health problems, psychiatry has become a billion-dollar industry. And one of the biggest hospital corporations in America has resorted to kidnapping.
I was sitting in my office, and my partner, who was the Joe Science at the time, he got a call from the hospital. It was Colonial Hills. And what happened was, like, when he get a call or something like that, he just come over to where I'm at and said, well, we got a case to go on, and that's that, so we just go. Well, basically, I was paid to transport patients from their home to the hospital. Just do a job. I don't have a PhD or nothing like that.
Ulysses Jones worked for Sector 1, a private security company in Texas. Sector 1 had delivery contracts with private psychiatric hospitals to bring people in. On April the 12th last year, they received orders to pick up a 14-year-old San Antonio schoolboy, Jeremy Harrell. The price for the job, $75 an hour. In Texas, they call them bounty hunters. Sector 1 had orders from a doctor who had never even met Jeremy Harrell.
Well, Dr. Bolin asked for Jeremy Harrell to be picked up, but they had no idea that he never seen the kid or interviewed him or nothing like that.
They flashed a badge at me. They both had a coat on. They just kind of opened their coat. We're police officers. We're here to pick up Jeremy. I said, what'd he do? They said they didn't know. I looked at Jeremy. I said, what did you do? He said, I didn't do a thing. They did not have a court order. They didn't have any kind of order except Dr. Mark Boland's word. And he didn't know what he was talking about because there was nothing wrong with the boy.
Jeremy Harrell had no history of mental illness.
Told him they weren't going to take him. They said, well, if he doesn't go voluntarily, then we'll go get a court order and he'll have to stay up to 28 days. If he goes voluntarily, he only has to stay 24 hours. Well, Jeremy was upset and he said, Mom, let me go. I can take care of myself for 24 hours. I said, no, they needn't come in here like the Gestapo and take over. This is a free country and I can do what the heck I want to. And they've got no reason to pick you up. You didn't do anything.
I'm trying to think what I'm supposed to do. You know, I'm trying to calm them, you know, to get some sense. And I don't know whether to, you know, just take a chance and attack and get the whole bunch of us shot. Or you know, you really feel worthless.
There was nothing we could do to stop them. We called the Live Oak police. We called a lawyer. They would not talk to the lawyer. And the police couldn't do anything either. I think they just kidnapped him.
Colonial Hills Hospital is located in northwest San Antonio. Over the years, it has come to symbolize hope for those who are drawn to its professional, caring environment.
Parents are sometimes concerned about bringing their small child or adolescent to a psychiatric hospital. Let me assure you that this is a place where your child can not only be safe, but get the kind of help that will bring them out of their emotional difficulties and problems that they've been experiencing at home or at school.
This is a good place.
This is a fine place where your child or teenager will be taken care of.
Colonial Hills belongs to one of America's biggest private hospital corporations. But the kidnap of Jeremy Harrell was not an isolated case. Scott Wakeoff was trying to save a marriage. He found a therapist to help him and his wife sort out their problems.
I was trying to save a marriage, not for my benefit, not for my wife's benefit, but for my 18-month-old baby's benefit.
He didn't know the therapist had a private contract with Colonial Hills, which last year was worth over $36,000.
My wife had an appointment with the marital therapist at 6 o'clock, and at 8:30 that night, when she had not shown up, I became quite concerned. I had called the therapist's office to see if she had been in or if, indeed, when she left. Around 11 o'clock that night, they returned my phone call and told me that my wife was at Colonial Hills Hospital. I'd asked her what that was, and she had informed me it was a psychiatric hospital and that she had done all she could for my wife.
What did you think had happened to her?
I thought she had had a nervous breakdown. I couldn't understand why or what was going on. I was just basically real concerned for her health. What am I supposed to do at this point? I've got a guy babysitting my daughter. And I walked into the front area of Colonial Hills and identified myself. The security guard came back with a lady who identified herself as an administrator for Colonial Hills. And she asked me to go with her. As we walked down the corridor, I heard a door shut behind me. We proceeded forward, went through a set of double doors on the left side. And when I went through those doors, they stopped. The lady turned around with a set of keys and locked the deadbolt on it. At this time, I still wasn't aware of anything until 4 other men, plus the 2 security guards, came into the lobby area and surrounded me.
Scott Wakeoff found himself a prisoner.
I asked where my wife was, and she told me that she wasn't there at that time, that they had orders by a Dr. Mark Boland to hold me. They kept me there completely involuntarily. For the full 28 days was involuntarily.
I called over there after the 24 hours were up. Nobody would talk to me. My husband went over there, tried to pick him up. He could not get in the door. He thought we had abandoned him. He asked for clothes. We couldn't bring him clothes. They wouldn't let us talk to him on the phone or anything. We called over there. As far as we were concerned, he wasn't even there. Had no rights.
Dr. Boland did sell my life to that hospital for $28,000. That's all it was worth to them, was the amount that the insurance would cover. And his portion of it was $10,000.
Working directly with the children is a dedicated, caring staff of physicians, psychologists, occupational and recreational therapists, teachers, case managers, and a large nursing staff that provides quality 24-hour care.
Mark Bolan was a fraud. Colonial Hills had employed a man who forged his credentials to obtain a license to practice medicine.
You've admitted that you forged 2 letters down in Texas. One, you forged Ned Casson's linked letter to John Henry's. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. I apologize to Dr. Casson and talked to him.
Mark Bolan and Colonial Hills now face criminal charges for false imprisonment.
His credentials were not even valid at the time. He had falsified his records to the hospital. It's the hospital's responsibility to know that he was a proper form, that he was practicing right. And they did not do that. They gave him the ability to bring people in and use his signature and his credentials to hold them there.
The only thing he saw was dollar signs. He didn't care about anything except the money. He knew my husband is ex-military, retired military. We have good insurance. And that's the only thing Mark Bolan cared about.
What do you think about that?
What I think about him? I think he's lower than whale crap, and that's in the bottom of the ocean.
Colonial Hills not only needed patients, they needed doctors to work the system. One of those approached by the hospital's administrator was Dr. Charles Arnold.
They had made a number of doctors very rich and offered to make me rich if I would, as he put it, go along with the program, change my way of thinking, and cooperate with him. Now, I asked him to explain this in greater detail, which apparently consisted of getting my cooperation and my willingness to approve with my MD degree anyone he could find to bring into the hospital. It made no difference whether they were sick or ill, just wherever they could find people. Once the person was brought to the hospital, I would be required to okay the admission, since I have an MD degree. Once that was done, that person would be placed in the hospital under my name, but I would really not have to do anything because he and his treatment team would take over the what's called the program. Now, if I would cooperate with that, I could go in to each patient each day and say, well, how are you doing today? Are they doing okay? Are you happy here? And then I could leave. And for that, I could send in a bill to the insurance company for $100, $125 a day per patient. Now, this could generate, one doctor in Houston, I was told, had 30 to 35 people in a hospital. There is no way one human being can take care of that many people in a valid ethical psychiatric setting. That would generate $3,000 a day before you went to the office. If I had 30 patients in the hospital, that would be approximately $90,000 to $100,000 a month that I could have made. My initial reaction was just absolute rage. I was very, very angry when he left my office. It evokes many feelings. It's hard to think of words to describe this. And what troubles me even more is that this is an extremely, extremely prevalent practice in the United States today.
What we thought was a local issue in one city in Texas quickly magnified into a statewide scandal, and that has expanded nationally. I can't say where it began and where it ended as far as the degrees that these hospitals would go to put someone in those beds, but we have seen just about every kind of abuse there is. Patients who have gone in voluntarily and been locked up against their will, patients who have been booted out of the hospital once their insurance expires. We have had exorbitant marketing schemes to pull patients into this vortex that I mentioned. And one of those, for example, is a suicide hotline, a 1-800 number, which refers you to a 1-900 number, which makes $2 a minute off your call while you're deciding whether or not to take your life.
Hello, Mrs. Morrissey? This is Sandy's mother. Is my daughter there? Hello, Mrs. Carpenter. Have you seen Sandy? Hello, Mrs. Weller. I'm looking for Sandy.
If someone you love is running away from their problems, call Laurelwood Hospital in the Woodlands at 800-999-4435.
Psychiatrists are in a position of public trust. The public assumes that you're trustworthy, that you will be honest and ethical and fair. Now, that puts you in a position to abuse and to exploit a patient who trusts you. And this is done daily. You can see pretty much daily psychiatrists and clinics and hospitals advertising and appealing to these fears on television, radio, the newspapers, and so forth. And it has become an industry, definitely an industry.
Psychiatric healthcare is big business. It's worth $50 billion a year, and it's still growing. In the 1980s, the numbers of private psychiatric hospitals more than doubled, and the greatest growth was in Texas. One of the biggest corporate chains, with a turnover of more than $4 billion last year, is National Medical Enterprises and its subsidiary, Psychiatric Institutes of America, PIA.
PIA has the reputation of being one of the most aggressive companies in mental health today. I worked for a PIA hospital for about 2 years, and for most of that time I was a program director in charge of their day hospital section.
Dr. Jim Hutchison is a child psychologist, now working independently in Houston.
The marketing effort at PIA is a very high priority. They are a business operation. They aggressively pursue profit, and they make sure that marketing is one of the chief objectives of people who work for them there. So I would say marketing is fundamental to the operation of these hospitals. You're trying to keep your census high, that means fill the beds. The marketing operation is designed exactly to do that. The marketing focus was at one meeting on a Friday called the Marketing Rally, and it was organized like a pep rally. It would last for at least an hour. As many people who could be spared from hospital functioning attended that meeting. And that was all the program directors, and certainly all the senior staff were there. It was conducted in a rah-rah kind of a way, and you had to go get them. Go get out there and give the good word about this hospital. There were prizes awarded for effort and so on.
I still can't believe what our son's problems did to our family. The screaming, the fights. And everything to do with school was just a nightmare. I finally realized we had to find some help.
Hang on. Everything okay?
It sure is.
If you are trying to deal with a troubled teenager, call Baywood Hospital now at 713-332-9550.
And then you have the whole idea that mental health should be for money. Now, I have no objection to earning some money, of course. I'm a professional, I have to earn my living. But when you decide that money is the bottom line, and it takes away from what brings many of us into mental health in the first place, which is a care and concern for people. You've gone from trying to put people first to putting the balance sheet first. There is a cynical manipulation of people here, and it's being done for money reasons only.
Hi, Kathy. Everything going all right this afternoon?
Pretty good, thank you.
I need to get a couple of discharge summaries. I need to
Okay.
get one on Ruth Barber.
All right. Here's hers.
Okay. And then Jared Norris.
Okay. Here you go.
Okay, I'll bring him back just a little
Okay,
bit.
thank you.
I've been in healthcare now for 23 years. I've got a lot of background. I was at Psychiatric Institute for about a year. I took care of such things as all the patient billing and the medical records and accounts payable, payroll, and then the financial reporting for the hospital. The beauty of the psych hospitals is the fact that you can get into them relatively cheap. Psych hospitals such as we had, we're looking at $6-7 million investment. You're looking at a med-surg hospital in the same neighborhood, you're looking at a $45 million investment. The other situation is you've got a tremendous cash flow. The cash flow starts almost immediately. We were making in the range of 36% profit margin on our operation. In healthcare, if you have an 8 to 10% profit margin, you're considered a hero. So we were doing extremely well.
Were you making too much profit?
Way too much profit. We had a little over $670,000 off the books, and like I said, we were a relatively small hospital in the PIA scheme of things. We had made $4.2 million. We were scheduled to make 2.7. We made 4.2. We had $670,000 in ghost expenses, so yes, we made a lot of profit for them.
The manner in which private psychiatric hospitals conduct their business in Texas, for the most part, is illegitimate and is illegal.
The Attorney General's office in Texas is conducting a major investigation into private psychiatric abuse. Its division chief is Joe Cruz. He is investigating more than 600 separate complaints.
Okay. Thank you very much.
300 alone on PIA.
This is clearly by far the largest case that we've ever worked on, and it'll take on any given day a third of the resources of the division. It's a huge investment of resources, but it's the sort of case that requires it. Bill.
Mr. Cruz.
What do you know about that Brookhaven matter, the church connection that we were talking about earlier? It's much bigger than anything that we have done in this office, not only my division, but the entire office of the Attorney General, in anyone's memory. It is so big that when I first raised this issue nationally with other attorneys general, that no one was willing to take it on, no one was interested in it, because no one has the resources. None of the states have the resources to really take these people on. So we came back to Texas and just decided that we would go it on our own and see how we did. Roy, my name is Joe Cruz. I've come here today because I understand that you have some information for us. And if you could provide me with any information that you feel comfortable in sharing, I'd appreciate it. Okay.
I've had 18 major surgeries and almost 45 hours of under the knife in the last 3 years.
A surgeon's knife had left Roy Shannon with no spleen and most of his intestines and bowels removed. He was in intense pain. In the process, he'd become seriously addicted to painkillers and heavy drugs. To counter his pain and addiction, he was referred to a PIA hospital in Dallas.
The telephone conversation that I had with Dr. Leon through Brookhaven Psychiatric Hospital had assured me that he could get me on the road to recovery. He painted a very nice picture, but that's not what happened. He diagnosed me on the phone as being a manic depressive.
We found that Brookhaven is probably one of the worst actors, at least in the state. We think primarily because of the clientele that they are usually able to attract out there, but also because they employ some unusual forms of psychological therapy that are still in testing stages for most reasonable practitioners.
Their plan for detoxification is they strap you to a bed in leather restraints.
And what happened?
You're left there. I was left that way through the night, and they had strapped me during that time. My legs were spread, my arms were down to the side of the bed, and they were just strapped with kind of like a leather bands to the bed rails. You're left with a bowel that has no control, as a baby has, and it's like staying in dirty diapers, you know, through the evening, into the night, all night, into the next day. And then someone comes in and unstraps you and tells you to get up and clean yourself up and let's go to a meeting.
How is that supposed to take you off drugs?
I have no idea how that cuts you from drugs. I mean, they restrain you and restrict you. It's like a cold turkey type thing. I felt dejected and rejected. I felt hurt, abused.
It's a tough world out there. Sometimes it feels like everybody's gunning for you. It seems like no matter where you hide, trouble's not far behind. Caught in the crossfire of life, call us. Directions, a mental health referral service, 777-7100. We'll connect you with a professional who can help. Because in this life, everyone needs reinforcement. Directions, call us.
Did you have any coverage at all when you were first admitted?
That's the only way I got in. They're showing double charges. If you look, they're the dates, detoxification and the bed times. So you've got 13 days there.
Were you in a private room?
Yes, yes. My insurance would cover up to $50,000 when needed for a psychiatric and detoxification program. If it could be proven that at the end of the $50,000 that it could be transferred over into the medical, then it could continue to pay with no maximums. At the end of the 6 weeks period that I had been there, when they found out that my insurance would definitely not transfer it from psychiatric to medical, then they all of a sudden were ready to release me, and they did release me.
I was in the hospital for basically 28 days, and till all of a sudden a miraculous recovery occurred and the insurance ran out.
From day one, the planned discharge date would tie to when their insurance benefits would run out in a lot of cases.
And how often did that happen?
Everybody that had a limit on their insurance policy. If you had unlimited benefits, then we'd keep you longer.
Texas is the first state to hold Senate hearings into private psychiatric hospital abuse. 9 other states are planning similar investigations.
The Senate Interim Committee on Health and Human Services will please come to order. Members, this is the third in a series of work sessions in the committee to consider and adopt appropriate remedies to address the myriad of problems that we have identified involving private psychiatric and substance abuse services. We still have plenty of work ahead of us, so let's get started.
In the course of the committee's investigation, the members have heard repeated allegations of outright fraud on the part of healthcare providers. 12 hours of dance therapy in a single day, all kinds of abuses like that. And of course, the problem is not just restricted to substance abuse or mental health treatment. It seems to be endemic to healthcare in general. I believe that there are people from the Department of Insurance that are prepared to address this directly.
I think it would be a fair statement to say there is a lot of fraud out there. The area of healthcare claims fraud is rife with abuse. It is rife with instances of double billings, overbillings, rebates, which are illegal returns of premiums, actual rings of people who are engaged in fraudulent activity and who are doing that on a planned and very extensive basis. And of course, it's driving everybody's health premiums up.
Fraud in mental health care claims is estimated to cost the United States over $5 billion a year.
Normally, if a person needs psychotherapy or discussion of problems and so forth, I would say an absolute maximum on an isolated day would be 2 hours. Normally no more than an hour in one day. Now, I've seen cases and reviewed them where 10, 12, 14 hours of therapy, so-called, was given in one day. And this has included people who were in a coma, people who had dementia and by definition could not remember what they talked about the following day. They would give as many therapy types a day as they could. And these include such things as what are called therapeutic walks. If you go for a walk, that's therapy. You can charge $40 for that. Art therapy, psychodrama, cognitive therapy, group therapy, multi-group therapy, family therapy, individual therapy. It's endless. Music therapy, play the guitar, sing a song, talk about it, and charge $40 for therapy.
It's real important is that all your goals are written down and you will be held accountable for them. And Lillian, what's your goal for today?
Well, I tell you what my goal was after I talked to Dr. Bailey when he sat with me at the table and we talked everything. He said, Lillian, I'm going to see if you can go home towards the weekend. I said, that sounds good. So I thought to myself, I ought to be real sweet to all these people here that they want. No, that's what my mother always said. If you go out anywhere, I could go a lot of times. She said, don't you be ugly, you be sweet to everybody if you like them or not. So that's my goal for today.
Wonderful, good, that's real good. I'm glad to hear that. Okay, Muggsy, what's your goal for today?
I'm gonna not sleep so much and be more active.
Good, good for you.
A lot of parents don't know their teenager is headed for trouble until the school tells them. They have no idea how much trouble he's really in until school gets out. They hope the problem will get better over the summer until it gets worse. The truth is, some parents don't want to believe there's a problem at all until there's no solution. Don't let your teenager waste another school year. Specialized care just for kids.
Clearly, the thing that's affected me the most is the way that this industry has insidiously gotten itself involved with children. And they do so in a variety of ways. The most blatant example is the way that psychiatric facilities in Texas have obtained a presence in school counseling facilities in independent school districts throughout the state. And it's such an insidious way for them to get business, that is through the school districts and by way of preying on minors. That's the thing that really troubles me the most.
Psychiatric hospitals place their own counselors in American schools. In Texas, investigations are now underway in 24 school districts for illegal referrals to their hospitals.
And we started admitting children as young as 2 and 3 years of age. That gets you a little bit. Then the adolescent program, it was easy to admit those patients, and we knew they were going to stay for a long time. And they had no say in the admission, so they'd be there for 60 to 90 days.
We've seen the referrals being made by school counselors, people that as we grow up in life, we've been taught to put our trust in. And instead, many times our schools become pipelines for our students into these private hospitals. And sometimes, if possible, in many cases we heard where that was used to pull not just the child in, but the parents as well.
Quartitia Dupree had just had her 4th birthday when she was referred for a consultation at Laurelwood, a PIA hospital in Houston.
Get up there. I don't see, you can't do it. You did it. Okay, you ready to come down?
Her mother, Laisha, suspected the child had been sexually abused.
Not from up there. You better try down here.
PIA persuaded her that Quartitia needed immediate hospitalization. They suggested she stay with the child for 4 days to keep her company.
After the 4 days were up, I was ready to go, and they were trying to keep me there. I kept saying, hey, I want to get out of here, you know, my time is up. And she kept saying that, no, I really think it's something inside you that's wanting to come out and will come out, and it's going to be a nasty sight, you know. And I'm like, I don't care, you know, even if so, I'm ready to go. And, you know, they just refused and refused and refused. So at that time, I decided to start saying, hey, I'm not going to pay insurance.
The hospital's attitude towards Laisha changed. They separated her from her child until one evening she was summoned to the children's unit.
Next thing I know, she said, grab her. And this guy, before I can even turn my head, he grabbed me. And then the guy that called me to have me to come over there from the beginning, he comes out, you know, finally, and he says, strap. And it's like they went around the corner to get to, you know, the strap, and it's like everything was just set up because it took them less than a, you know, second to grab me, and less than, you know, maybe 2 or 3 seconds to get the strap. And he took his knees, the guy that was holding me took his knees and bit my knees in and brought me down to the floor. And he like stumbled, you know, fell on top of me. When I kind of started going off, then I was like, what are you doing to me? You know, let me go, let me go. And my daughter was standing there the whole time watching everything, and that's when I said to them, just please get her out of here, don't let her see this, you know. And she was just up there crying, and it hurt me for her to have to see me being treated that way.
Hospital records show that PIA asked 4-year-old Quartitia whether she'd ever thought of suicide.
I was so desperate, I called the police department. That's when I got a hold of Chief Cantu.
Well, it was a Saturday, and I had come in to do some extra work, and the phone rang, and I answered it, and it was a woman requesting assistance that she was being detained against her will in a hospital, and that she was not a patient there.
I guess when you're in a mental hospital or whatever the hospital it was, people aren't going to listen to you because they're going to think you're crazy. But, you know, that's not really the case.
I went in there with the intention of trying to do a constructive investigation. I felt that Laisha was telling me the truth. This other gentleman, I felt that he was holding back, he wasn't being cooperative, he wasn't giving me the information I needed, evasive. And finally, I felt that he was playing games with me, and I wasn't going to put up with it. She told me that right there in front of him she wanted to be let out, and I asked him, I said, are you going to let her out? And he said, no. I said, well, we'll see about that. I came back to my office. I started making some phone calls to some judges and state representatives, and I got a phone call within about 2 hours that they had decided to let her go.
There is so much evidence in this situation. I mean, setting aside any anecdotal testimony from any witness out there, from anybody who's been in one of these facilities, the evidence as to how the system operates in and of itself is illegal. I mean, it's inherently evil in the manner in which this business is conducted. That's the problem. Now, over and above that, all of the testimony that we've received, that the Senate committee has received, and all the other government agencies that are investigating this have received, reflect a consistent pattern as to how people have been abused. And it's particularly horrible because the people that are being taken advantage of here are people who do have problems.
A person can be committed into a psychiatric hospital too easily. All you need is
one normal person to contact the judge and say, this person is not normal, you know, the behavior of this person is strange. All the judge has to do is believe that person. The order is signed and you're put in the hospital. And once you go in there, it is extremely hard to get out.
In the private psychiatric boom of the 1980s, hospital corporations exploited widespread deregulation of healthcare to build wherever they wanted. And they took advantage of policies that financed treatment for mental health, drug and alcohol problems, and for victims of crime.
Beginning in the late 70s in this country, there was a sense of deregulation being good for the economy and for business, and a variety of other factors, all of which, when combined, result in basically an open market, no regulation, in an industry that has very low capital cost in terms of getting in and getting buildings built and these facilities established. And there just aren't any watchdogs.
I think the absence of the state's presence has a great deal to do with it. We have allowed the private sector to seek its own level. We haven't monitored the construction of hospital facilities, and they've basically been allowed to charge what the market will bear and to build what the market will bear as well. It's my understanding that many of the same providers that are operating here in Texas and in the United States are also setting up shop and in operation in England. And I just hope that you can learn by what we are doing here to put the mechanisms in place to provide the protection to the citizens of England, and get your guard up where you can be aware that these abuses can and will occur.
Under threat in America, U.S. hospital corporations are actively exploring opportunities overseas. They have targeted Britain for major expansion in the 1990s. 3 of them are already in the country. In Britain, PIA's parent company, National Medical Enterprises, aims to have over 50 long-term care facilities by 1993. In the state capital, the Attorney General's team is finalizing its investigation.
It's a long document, it's very comprehensive, but it's also very fair and rational. And it took us 4 or 5 lawyers 5 weeks almost night and day to put this thing together, because many of these issues are very complicated, technical kind of medical issues.
The bottom line is that we are currently negotiating a settlement agreement with National Medical Enterprises.
Our lawyers are very tenacious. Our investigators are very tenacious. They have been involved in this investigation now, I suppose, for the better part of a year, and they take this very, very seriously and very, very personally, and I think with good cause. I take it personally as well. This is an extremely egregious violation that has occurred, and it is one that cries out for aggressive and vigorous response. And if we can't put together a settlement agreement that I believe is in the public interest, we will not hesitate to go to court and litigate this matter.
The way we're going to clean it up is we're going to stay on them legally. We're going to sue them. And if we lose this case, we'll sue somebody else. We'll sue under a different theory. And we're just, this thing stinks, it's illegal, and we're going to find a way to run them out of business.
National Medical Enterprises has now reached a settlement with the Texas Attorney General. They agreed to pay out over $9 million in compensation. NME has announced the closure of both Colonial Hills and Laurelwood hospitals. But while they still face investigations by the FBI, Department of Defense, and the US Congress, they remain in the psychiatric business. NME refused to take part in this program.
The biggest loss of it so far has been my daughter. I lost contact with my daughter through it. The day before I was released from Colonial Hills, my ex-wife filed divorce. When I came back to the house, my house was empty. My daughter's stuff was all gone. The divorce took quite some time. Dr. Boland testified against me in my divorce and testified of what a horrible person I could be. And the judge basically took in his credentials and his credibility into account, and I was restricted visitation of my daughter. My ex-wife has moved out of the state and has taken my daughter with her. And I have not been able to bring her back home.
I personally feel strongly about it because it is destroying the credibility, the honor, the respect, the trust that people have in my profession. And this is my life. I take it very personal. It's very destructive. It destroys that, and it destroys the people in the long run that get involved with it.
It's hard to describe. It's just unbelievable. Anything. To this day, I really can't believe it happened, but it did, and it just tore our whole family apart.
I'm still angry, and I'll always be angry and be bitter about it, but there's nothing that I can do about it. There's no one out there that would believe, back then what I had to say, and now it's too late.